I'm speaking with soprano Julianne Baird, who's in town for a concert with the American Bach soloists. And last night I had the privilege of hearing her sing the soprano role in the cantata 208, the hunting cantata, in which she sang the famous "Sheep May Safely Graze" aria, which for me was the highlight of the entire concert, I have to tell you. When we spoke before, you mentioned that Bach was oftentimes more instrumental in his vocal writing than some composers. Would you say that was true in this particular instance, or would this be an exception?
I think people like Schafe können sicher weiden, the proper German title for Sheep May Safely Graze, partly because it is so tuneful. It's a great tune, and you can remember it, and of course there's the pastoral effect created by the piping shepherds, I guess. Adds to the whole effect, and it's one of the most arranged Bach pieces that there is. So he could write a wonderful melody. Please, I should not have left it that he was just so instrumental. But in general, he uses the voice. Well, he asks the instruments to do things that are extremely difficult for them, and a lot of the ornamentation is already written out in the instrumental part, and the singer doesn't have anything quite so tuneful, shall I say. It's an exception, I think, but there are great Bach exceptions. I mean, Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring is one, and what we call the air on the G string is another. I mean, there are tons of great melodies by Bach. It's just that, by and large, he saved some of his most interesting writing for the instruments, I feel.
In just a moment, we're going to hear one of the pieces that you performed when you were in town earlier this year with the Early Music Society, and that was the aria from Julius Caesar, the Piangero, which was one of the most beautiful of Handel melodies. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that piece?
Piangero comes from Julius Caesar of Handel, and it is an aria that is sung by Cleopatra in a moment of high anxiety. She thinks that her whole family has died, or that Caesar's dead, and that all of those who would support her are imprisoned or otherwise disabled. And so she says, I weep, I bemoan my cruel fate. But the interesting thing about the aria is that it makes a very abrupt change in the B section to quite a furious passion, with the protagonist singing, "But I will return from the grave to avenge myself." And then again, once again, quite suddenly makes this change back to the bemoaning weeping. And it's interesting, when you read a certain treatise writer of this time, Pier Francesco Tosi, he says that there's an inherent problem in the da capo aria if it does exactly this, namely change emotions suddenly, because it becomes slightly unbelievable to the audience. You have to suspend any sense of reality. But of course, in opera, when are we not suspending reality in any case?
But then you also return to that original emotion afterwards, do you not?
Exactly. That I think is the part that treatise writer Tosi had the greatest trouble with. That it's fine to say, I'm in pain, I suffer, and then to change out of that to say, but no, I'll come back from hell and avenge myself, only to have it return to, I'm in pain, I suffer. It seems, I think he felt that was a kind of a stretching of the ability of the listener to believe what was going on.
Musically, it makes perfect sense, but as far as the text...
That's right. The music is, of course, glorious.
One of the things that it seems to me is almost your vocal signature is your ability to produce the most subtle shadings of volume. And I know that most everything that you do is calculated to illustrate the text. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you use that technique.
It is true. I've found that when I try to drive my voice, that I don't like the effect either of the sound that I get or of the timbre that it makes. And generally I find that if I'm doing that, I'm probably not paying a lot of attention to the words. In the course of a sentence in German, each syllable should not have equal stress anyway. Just say the title of a Bach cantata text, weinen, sorgen, sagen. All the n sounds are very, very weak. They're weak. I guess you'd say they're mute syllables almost, as one would in French. And they have to be sung less. So when you're delivering a text, you have to be very careful not to make equal stress. And a lot of singers are taught today to make a beautiful series of pearls They create one beautiful note after another, and it's begun and ended with the same volume. And the idea of changing the volume for a word maybe seems a little far-fetched to them. And so first of all, in singing other languages, it's very important to get the inflection. You'd never do it in English. You'd never make the mistake that you might make in another language in English because it's a native tongue. The other thing that comes up is that a singer of that time was believed that they ought to be, whether or not they all were, well versed in rhetoric. And by rhetoric, I mean it in the good sense, the ability to speak convincingly, to move the audience, to express the passions, to make the audience feel the passions, even if the speaker himself does not feel them, intimately himself. To be able to move, in short, and to affect the audience. Well, I think of, for example, this wonderful piece by Purcell with a text by Fuller called "Lord, What is Man?" And when I coach the piece, sometimes I have people do it as though they were a Baptist minister in order to inflect the words, because it says, "Lord, what is man, lost man, that thou shouldst be so mindful of him?" And then the text it proceeds to repeat 3 times. So, what do? Say, "Lord, what is," just exactly the same time, the same way each time, or do you try to point up a different word? So I found that it's helpful to say, for the first time, "Lord, what is man, that thou shouldst be so mindful of him?" Then the second time, perhaps to say, "Lord, what is man, that thou shouldst be so mindful of him?" And then maybe the last time you say, "Lord, what is man?" I know this seems a little bit artificial perhaps, but if the singer thinks about this, it's the way powerful speakers speak. They will take sometimes a word that is just a passing word and make us dwell on it for a second, and thereby give a slightly different view to what's being said. I mean, view in the sense of a different color to what's being said. So easy it is for us when we're singing in another language to let that level not happen. And that's why singers have to be so good in languages. They have to be able to pretend that they know intimately what's going on. If they don't know it, then they have to study the poetry of the given piece that they're working on and gain that kind of intimacy, at least on a small level, with a few pieces.
What I enjoyed so much about your recordings of the English lute songs is even the songs that I know very well, I've heard many times before, such as "Come Again" by Dowland. The way you sing them has so many shadings and variations in volume in that the interpretations are just so much richer. And all of a sudden I began to see things in these songs very familiar songs that I hadn't seen before. And that's what I really enjoyed in hearing those.
Well, I think it's just like what we do with paintings in attempting to wipe away the patina of dirt or whatever. If you let the words come through, suddenly a lot of things make sense. And it's not that the singer perhaps is such a tremendously gifted interpreter, but the poetry has a chance to say its thing, rather than us having trouble hearing the language because the voice sounds exactly the same on every note. And that's important.
Let's talk about this recording of lullabies that has just come out. What a great idea for recording lullabies. I can't think of anybody's voice that I can think more suited to singing lullabies than yours, so gentle and sweet sounding. Do your children know how lucky they are to have mommy singing lullabies to them, or do they think everybody's mommy sounds as good?
Well, they have a tendency to associate actually my singing with my being gone, so and it's not quite as dreary a picture as I paint, but no, they don't mind hearing mommy sing, and I think that when they're older they'll appreciate that this was largely a labor of love to do lullaby recording for my children. But it's an unusual lullaby recording. It is by and large classical lullabies, Brahms and Fauré, but done with folk instruments. So there are a variety of instruments on the on the CD there are panny whistles and guitars and banjos. In fact, a muted banjo has very much, to my ear, the sound of a music box. So there's a childlike innocence about the banjo when played in its high frequencies and muted that you would never guess. I think if you didn't know it was a banjo, you'd wonder maybe what kind of synthesized instrument it might be. There are strings, as in Jesu Joy of Man's Desiring, and a fair number of well-known pieces, but done in a way that is a little different, as simplified, shall we say. Maybe the most complex one on the recording is the Strauss-Wiegenlied, which is basically a big orchestra piece, which in this arrangement is done with a quartet of strings and guitar. But it's very effective and has the same, I don't think a thing is lost in translation, if you will. And I think it's the kind of lullaby record I'd want to present to children because it is classical lullabies in their own languages. There's no attempt to change that, but there is, I guess, a returning to the most simple qualities of the lullaby, which is it's Hausmusik. It's whatever you have around to accompany it, and there's a simplicity about this recording that I like.
Pick a couple of the lullabies and we'll play them now.
All right, I'd say Jesu Joy of Man's Desiring is a favorite of mine. I guess my next favorite would probably be the Strauss-Wiegenlied that I mentioned. And I love the Christ Child's Lullaby that we've paired with O Can Ye Sow Cushions. They're both, well, I think one is a Welsh melody and the first one is a well-known Scottish melody, but they've been linked in a kind of nice way. And then if you're looking for something slightly less lullaby-ish, maybe a little more up-tempo, this traditional Irish piece called Dance for Your Daddy is paired together with another Irish dandling song called Cuckinandy. They're for dandling the child on your knee when he's fussy or she's fussy, and they're very sweet with penny whistles and a very clever rhythmic arrangement. My collaborator in these projects, of which there are two now and soon to be a third one of the Songs of the Auvergne, is a man named Bill Crowfoot, who might well be known to a certain hippie-age generation as a folk singer. He was a protege of Pete Seeger and worked a lot with Benjamin Luxon. They had some recordings released called Two Gentlemen Folk and things like that. And so I'm his most recent collaborator in projects of this type. In any case, it's on Albany Records, and they have requested that we make some more soon, so we're looking at other projects.
You're performing again tonight with the American Bach soloists. When can we look forward to your next appearance in the Bay Area?
Well, it's funny. I don't know that I'll be coming back next year yet. I know I'm going to Vancouver to do Messiah, and if we are lucky enough to have a repeat of the American Bach soloists, and I must hasten to say that it's one of the most wonderful early instrument ensembles in this country, and it's at its very most critical point. It's between years 2 and 3, and that's just before federal and state funding for the arts generally kicks in for a new group, but often after the bloom of getting something off the ground has worn off. And I just would urge the Bay Area to notice and hopefully support this wonderful ensemble. And I hope to be coming back to sing with them, too.
Well, I certainly hope you come back soon. I enjoy hearing you every time you're in town.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.